Good evening. And tonight you wake as a guest at a grand Rothschild English country estate in 1870, where heated orchid houses breathe humid warmth into cool Buckinghamshire air. Beeswax-polished parquet gleams under gaslit chandeliers, raked gravel whispers through tall sash windows, and men rise before dawn simply to keep tropical flowers from noticing they are in England. Welcome back, Aoife in Dublin and Hannah in Yorkshire, who both commented on the last video and stayed until the end, and I am glad you are here again. Tell me where you are and what time it is for you, just like Aoife and Hannah did, and if you would like to fall asleep easily every episode, you can like and subscribe. Have you ever wondered what it feels like when a room has been prepared so carefully that it seems to be expecting your thoughts? Here, the house is already several steps ahead of you. The air carries warm coal, damp orchid glass, fresh linen, and the soft, sweet shine of beeswax from floors longer than some village streets. Before your hand even finds the bell pull, someone below stairs is polishing a tray for your tea. Someone in the corridor is folding warmed towels, and Mr. Hobbs is almost certainly moving toward you with that famous patient eyebrow. You wake inside a bed that feels less slept in than arranged around you. The sheets are smooth and cool near your wrists. The middle of the mattress still holds the night's careful warmth. The fire is already awake. It gives off a steady heat with none of the noisy fuss of being newly lit. Someone has come in before dawn and made sure of that. The curtains are not fully open. They are parted by exactly enough to let in a washed silver light. It is the sort of judgment that suggests long practice and very little applause. You lie still for a moment and look around. The room seems to have decided, before you arrived, what kind of morning you ought to have. It has made a thorough case for comfort. At the foot of the bed sits your traveling case, but only just. It no longer looks like luggage. It looks as if it has already been politely absorbed into the life of the house. Your clothes for the morning wait on a chair near the fire. They have been brushed, pressed, and aired. Your boots stand below like two very obedient dark animals. Even the laces seem calmer than usual. They are laid out in neat loops on the dressing table. In a lesser house, you might call this impressive. Here, it is merely Tuesday. A small jug of hot water sends up a last, lazy thread of steam. Beside it sits a basin with a clean cloth folded over the rim. The cloth is warm at the edge where someone tested it. A coal scuttle rests near the grate. It has enough fuel for comfort, but not enough to look greedy. Everything in the room gives the same impression of quiet plenty. You notice little proofs of hands you never see. The hearth has been swept clean of yesterday's ash. The candlesticks are trimmed. The glass on the mantel clock is clear as still water. A vase of hothouse flowers stands on a side table. They're fresh enough to seem almost surprised by themselves. One petal has opened in the night while you sleep. The house likes to greet you with evidence. It does not simply tell you that it is rich. It shows you that someone had the time to choose the exact right flower. That is one of the first things you learn here. Wealth in a great estate often looks like people remembering details before you remember you wanted them. It is money that has hired memory. Before you arrived yesterday, your room is already under discussion somewhere below stairs. Your name is written on a list. Your things are expected. Your habits are guessed at with alarming accuracy. A room maid has aired the bed linen near the fire. Another pair of hands has laid coal. Someone else has beaten dust from the rug and polished the brass until it behaves. A laundress has sent up fresh towels with the starch softened just enough. A boot boy has taken charge of leather. A housemaid has adjusted the curtains so morning enters kindly rather than all at once. Your arrival does not begin when your carriage reaches the gravel. It begins hours earlier in service rooms and passages you may never see. The estate starts receiving you long before you arrive. That is the private marvel of a house like this. The grand front is only the face. The real work happens in the ribs and joints. You sit up, and the quilt falls back with a small weight. It is padded enough to keep out an English autumn chill. The linen beneath smells faintly of lavender and ironed cotton. There is a robe waiting on a screen nearby. It hangs ready at shoulder height, as if it hopes to be useful without appearing eager. The house is expert at eager things pretending not to be eager. Your own lady's maid is assigned to you for the week. She belongs for these few days to the odd temporary orbit of your comfort. She knows your room, your garments, and probably your missing glove before you do. She has almost certainly been in already. She has turned down fresh towels. She has checked your brushes. She has made judgments about your packing that she is too professional to share aloud. If you need hooks fastened, boots buttoned, a hem rescued, or a collar persuaded, she will manage it. If you need none of those things, she will still manage 3 others. Competence here comes in abundance. You feel that abundance in the strange ease of the room. Nothing asks to be done at once. That is because so much has already been done. A country house bedroom in 1870 is not a hotel room, though it has many of the same ambitions. It is more personal and more intrusive. The house means to take care of you thoroughly. On the dressing table sits a blotter, writing paper, and envelopes with the estate crest. The pen nib has been checked. The ink is full. Even your future correspondence has been given a head start. A folded card tells you the hours for breakfast and luncheon. It does so with the calm certainty of church bells. The house assumes, not unkindly, that you will fall into line. Through the tall window you hear the soft crush of raked gravel. It comes in little passes and pauses, like someone erasing yesterday's footsteps. Outside, the grounds are being made to look as if no one ever works on them. That is another talent of places like this. Labor is everywhere, but its highest duty is to appear nowhere. The park is maintained by a small human weather system. At this hour, the groundskeepers are already at it. They move along paths, lawns, and shrubberies with rakes, barrows, and shears. They are a Victorian lawn care subscription service with very poor opportunities for customer feedback. You can just make out the pale shape of the orchid houses beyond a belt of trees. Their glass catches the weak morning light. A soft haze hangs around them, where warm air meets cold Buckinghamshire damp. Inside those houses, the boilers must have been fed long before sunrise. Pipes must stay warm through the night. Tropical flowers, it seems, are delicate about local weather and expect full support. Mr. Perkins is likely there now, moving among leaves glossy as polished boots. If he catches you later, he will explain the precise difference between a cattleya and a dendrobium. He will do this with the serene commitment of a man describing his grandchildren. The orchid house is, in every modern sense, the estate's Instagram account. It is expensive, admired, and quietly competitive. Perkins serves as full-time content moderator and trusts no one near the pedals. You breathe in again and catch the house itself. There is beeswax from the floors. There is coal from the grates. There is a faint damp sweetness from flowers that definitely did not grow naturally in Buckinghamshire. The scale of the place reaches you before you leave the bed. You can feel it in the stretch of silence between one small sound and the next. Nothing nearby sounds close. A door shuts somewhere far down the corridor. The sound arrives softened by carpets, distance, and money. In a smaller house, you would know exactly who moved. Here, the walls are thick and the passages long. A footman can cross from one end of the guest floor to the other and return with a tray before you work out where he came from. The house has its own weather, its own timing, and probably its own opinions. You begin to understand why guests speak of these estates in terms usually reserved for ships or cathedrals. There are routes to learn. There are rules of sound. There are places where one simply hopes to be collected. The morning itself is ruled by bells. Not one bell, but many. A great house begins the day in layers, like an onion with better silver. The earliest bell does not concern you at all. It rings for the servants in darkness. It says that fires, kettles, lamps, and floors must start before daylight offers any encouragement. Another bell follows for kitchen work, another for the housemaids. Another marks the movement of hot water, coal, and brushes from service stair to service stair. By the time a guest hears anything intended for a guest, the house has already been awake for hours in spirit, and at least one in fact. What reaches you is the softened final note of a much larger hidden score. That is the hierarchy of comfort here. Others rise first, so that you may wake gently. The luxury is not only what you have, but how little you need to think about how it gets there. Still, your own room has its private power over the machinery below. A braided bell pull hangs near the bed. It looks decorative, but it is as effective as any office memo. When you tug it, somewhere in a pantry or passage a small bell will ring. A marker on a board will drop beside your room. A human being will change direction on your behalf. It is a wonderfully direct system. It is also slightly unnerving. Victorian life often feels like living inside a very polite alarm network. You look at the bell pull and hesitate. The room is so complete already that asking for more feels almost greedy. Yet this is the logic of the house. It exists to continue supplying. Perhaps you want tea. Perhaps you want more hot water. Perhaps you merely want confirmation that the outside world still exists beyond layered drapery and coal heat. The tassel is thick and cool in your fingers. You give one small pull. The bell has barely stopped moving when the door opens. Mr. Hobbs enters with the flawless timing of a man who has somehow anticipated both your needs and your uncertainty about having needs. He seems not so much to walk as to become visible. One moment there is only the room. The next moment there is Mr. Hobbs, a tray, and the calm suggestion that this was always inevitable. He asks whether you slept well. The question lands softly and requires no real answer. Sleep in this house is treated like weather. One observes it and moves on to tea. On the tray sits a teapot under a quilted cover, a cup thin as an eggshell, sugar and 2 biscuits. There is also a small jug of hot milk. Even morning indecision has been catered for. Mr. Hobbs places the tray with exact care near your hand. He adjusts the cloth by half an inch. He notices the shifted cushion behind you before you do. His famous eyebrow is at rest this morning, though only just. It rises, people say, for breaches of table order, damp boots on good rugs, or the wrong spoon near preserved fruit. The eyebrow has been known to hover for 45 minutes. You feel that the eyebrow could also hover for sighing too loudly, folding a napkin into something inventive, or asking where the back stairs are. It does not scold, it merely archives. Mr. Hobbs tells you that your maid is ready whenever you wish to dress. He informs you that breakfast will be served at the proper hour. He says this in a tone that makes the proper hour sound both kind and inevitable. Then he mentions the post. There will be 3 deliveries through the day. Important letters are sorted before they reach the breakfast table, which is simply Victorian email with better handwriting and worse speed. If you are waiting for a reply, this can produce the exact same low hum of anxiety as a modern inbox. The difference is that here the anxiety travels by horse. It also wears a seal. Mr. Hobbs lets that information settle. He has the excellent butler's instinct for when a guest needs silence more than speech. He inclines his head and vanishes with the same soft precision with which he arrived. For a moment you sit alone again with the tea. The room feels even warmer after his departure. Outside the window, gravel continues its patient whispering. You pour a cup and watch the steam rise. It curls into the colder patch near the pane and disappears. That tiny meeting of temperatures seems to describe the whole estate. Warmth here is always being moved from one place to another. Fires warm rooms, boilers warm glass houses, ovens warm kitchens. People warm towels, plates, beds, and bathwater until the entire house feels managed against discomfort. You drink, and the tea is strong enough to persuade your thoughts into order. The biscuit is plain and crisp. It tastes of butter and good timing. Soon there is a discreet tap at the door. Your maid enters with the steady air of someone who has already completed 3 useful tasks elsewhere. She carries a fresh jug, folded linen, and quiet authority. She speaks little, because little is needed. She knows where everything is, because she has decided where everything ought to be. In another life, she could likely govern a county. She sets out what you need for washing. The basin water is renewed. The soap is pale and smells lightly of lemon. A towel warmed before the fire is placed within easy reach. There is no bathroom in the modern sense waiting behind a hidden door. There is instead this careful ritual of carried water, emptied basins, cloths, brushes, and brisk efficiency. Comfort comes in steps, each performed by someone reliable. You wash in stages while the room steadies into full morning light. The water is warm enough to be pleasant and cool enough to keep you from drifting back to sleep. The window glass holds a faint blur from the firelit room behind you. Your maid lays out the garments for the day in the order they will be needed. Linen first, then stockings, then the more structured outer parts, with their buttons, tapes, cuffs, and other determined little obstacles. 19th century dressing is a conversation between cloth and patience. Nothing simply slips on and agrees to behave. Every respectable garment has at least one opinion. Your maid manages those opinions without fuss. She fastens what must be fastened. She smooths what wrinkles. She brushes away one small coal fleck from your sleeve before it has the chance to become a matter. Boots come next, polished so well that the leather seems faintly liquid. A collar or tie, depending on the demands of the morning, is made to sit properly. Hair is dealt with in whichever historical arrangement you require, which is to say, not quickly. The great comfort of such service is not grandeur so much as removal of friction. You do not scramble for a missing pin, you do not search for a brush, you do not negotiate with a stubborn button alone. That is how a room begins to feel as if it already knows your name. It has been shaped around eliminating tiny annoyances before they reach you. The result is less dramatic than luxury novels promise and much more persuasive. When you are dressed, your maid opens the door and the scale of the house finally meets you face to face. The corridor extends in both directions with the serene confidence of a railway platform. Every few yards, another door waits under a framed print or wall sconce. The runner underfoot softens every step. The boards beneath are firm and old. Somewhere farther along, morning light falls across beeswax-polished parquet in a wider landing and glows like honey. The smell is richer out here. There is wax, linen, coal, and that faint distant note of damp leaves from the open world outside. The whole passage seems recently tended by invisible hands. You walk a little way and realize at once that the house does not believe in short distances. A bedroom is not near a sitting room. A sitting room is not near breakfast. Everything requires intention and decent shoes. That is part of the theater and part of the management. Long corridors keep rooms private. They also give servants time to appear carrying exactly what should appear next. At a turn in the passage, you pass a tall window. Through it, you see the park lifting into a pale morning. Men are still at the gravel. A barrow rolls across the drive and leaves no lasting trace. Below, another path runs toward the kitchen gardens. Those gardens do not look ornamental from here. They look practical, squared, and busy, as if the house has a second stomach hidden behind hedges. Later you will learn how much of the table begins there. Peas, lettuces, herbs, peaches against warm walls, strawberries under cloches, and enough forcing frames to make nature seem mildly employed. The great dining room upstairs starts with very tidy mud. For now, though, you only see movement and order. Everything is being readied before guests descend to admire the finished result. The estate specializes in appearing effortless, several hours after exhausting itself. A faint gong sounds somewhere below. It is not yet the breakfast gong. It is one of the smaller notices passing through the morning system. In this house, sound travels with purpose. You begin to notice other signs of waking guests. A door opens 2 rooms away. Someone coughs delicately. Fabric rustles, and then silence returns, because everyone suddenly remembers they are in a house where walls listen. Lady Ashworth appears at the far end of the corridor, already dressed and carrying judgment as lightly as some women carry lace. She pauses long enough to inspect a flower arrangement on a console table, as if interviewing it for a position. She gives you a greeting that is perfectly civil and lightly burdened by opinion. She remarks that the Rothschilds do everything on a scale bordering on municipal. You cannot tell whether she means this as praise, warning, or a challenge to heaven. Then her eyes move to the floor, the window drapery, and the polished brass, all in one glance. You can almost hear the figures working behind her forehead. Even she, it seems, is counting servants. She moves on with a faint rustle and a composed expression. Competitive anguish has rarely worn such good morning silk. Hobbes would probably produce half an eyebrow for the phrase municipal. You continue toward the landing and look down into the hall. Gas chandeliers above are turned low now that daylight helps. Their glass shades still hold little beads of warmth from the night. Below, a footman crosses with folded newspapers. Another sets flowers straight by the entrance table. The movements are so precise that you briefly suspect rehearsal. In truth, rehearsal is exactly what habit becomes in a house like this. The same corners are dusted each day. The same grates are blacked. The same silver is counted, polished, and sent back out to perform. What impresses you most is not that so many people work here. It is that the work has been sorted into tiny pieces and timed so carefully. One person warms plates, one manages lamps, one brushes clothes, one carries coals, one keeps track of bells, one keeps track of the people keeping track of bells. That is how 14 people can already have spent an hour on your behalf before you even decide between tea and chocolate. Large wealth turns comfort into an organized relay race. The baton is usually a tray. You lean on the banister for a moment and listen. From far below comes the muffled world of kitchens beginning their serious business. There are pans, distant voices, and the honorable urgency of breakfast not yet visible. Somewhere beyond that lies Augustin, the French head chef, small, immaculate, and quietly aggrieved by the English appetite for plainness. If anyone later requests that his breakfast egg be less complicated, he will almost certainly mutter in Lyonnese French and continue being correct. The house contains whole kingdoms you do not see from the landing. There are still rooms, pastry rooms, larders, wine vaults, linen stores, coal stores, plate pantries, and passages that probably know more secrets than Parliament. Yet all of it now narrows for you into one simple fact. You are expected at breakfast. You will arrive looking rested. The house has made certain of it. Behind you, your room waits in perfect order again. The bed has been straightened. The basin has been cleared. The fire has been persuaded to a polite morning burn. It is a small miracle of this place that you can turn your back on disorder and find none when you return. The room never sulks. It only resets. You take one last breath of the corridor air. Beeswax, coal, flowers, and the faint green damp from the orchid houses reach you all at once. It smells like an expensive argument against inconvenience. Then you start toward the stairs at the exact moment the proper breakfast gong sounds below. And somewhere in the hidden arteries of the estate, another dozen people change direction so that your day may continue without a single rough edge. You wake before the house decides to admit that it is morning. The air in your room feels cool and still, but somewhere below you a warm breath rises. You lie still for a moment and hear the estate beginning in layers. A cart rattles faintly. A door closes softly. Someone far off walks over gravel with the patient crunch of a rake-made world. When you dress and step into the corridor, the carpets hush your feet at once. The walls hold a deep night smell of wax, coal, and old wood polished by many careful hands. You follow the warm breath down a back passage with a little guilt and a lot of curiosity. It feels like finding the real pulse of the house before the official day begins. The kitchen greets you first with heat on your face and bright copper in the half-light. The great black range glows along its seams like a creature that sleeps with one eye open. You learn, in the calm way these things are said here, that it has not gone cold since 1864. It has been fed ever since. No one says this dramatically. They say it like weather. A junior kitchen maid tends it from 5 each morning. She is already there when you arrive. She has reddened hands, a neat cap, and the steady look of someone who knows every hiss this iron makes. You do not at once catch her name. Few above stairs seem to. She is simply the girl at the fire to most people, which feels both strange and oddly typical. You watch her open one small door and then another. She lifts out gray ash with a flat shovel. She banks one part with fresh coal and leaves another part glowing for the first kettles. The range is a whole street of heat in one iron wall. One oven bakes gently, another runs hotter, a boiler keeps water near a simmer. A plate on top warms pans before they meet the flame. She knows which spot will toast bread without scorching it. She knows which corner will keep a sauce merely alive. She knows how far to close the dampers when the room begins to grow too fierce. You smell coal smoke, damp ashes, and the clean, sharp note of black lead polish. Someone has rubbed the iron until it shines in oily blue patches that catch the firelight like dark glass. A kettle gives a small, high sound near the back. A second pot steams more heavily beside it. The whole thing seems less like one stove and more like the private climate of a busy kingdom. You stand near enough to feel your cuffs warm through. Your face grows pink on one side. Your back stays cool from the corridor. It is a very English way to be comfortable. The maid sweeps fallen cinders into a neat pan and empties it without fuss. She has already blacked the grate fronts. She has already carried in coal. She has already laid out kindling for smaller fires. No one praises her in your hearing. The range simply continues, and therefore breakfast exists, and therefore the world above stairs can discuss weather and newspapers with complete serenity. You suspect this fire is the true owner of the estate. Everyone else merely rents their importance from it for the day. Around the range, the kitchen wakes by degree. A scullery girl brings in stacks of plates that still smell faintly of soap and steam. Another maid shakes out cloths and hangs them near the warmth to dry. A boy passes with loaves under a folded cloth. He moves carefully around the wet stones by the pump. Even his caution seems practiced, as if someone trained his elbows as well as his feet. The first deliveries from the kitchen garden arrive while the sky outside is still pale and pearly. You hear the wheels before you see them. Then a barrow comes through the yard gate with a green smell attached. Everything looks newly lifted from the earth and only half persuaded indoors. Lettuce hearts sit in shallow baskets, with dew caught between the leaves. Radishes arrive in tight bunches with a little soil still clinging like proof. Peas come in wicker hampers lined with sacking. The pods are cool and taut under your fingers when you are invited to touch them. Bunches of herbs lie across the top like fragrant handwriting. Mint trails over one basket in soft tangled ropes. Parsley forms a thick, dark mound. Chervil looks delicate and feathery in a way that suggests it will bruise if you merely think too loudly near it. A boy from the garden sets down cucumbers from the frames with absurd care. They are wrapped in paper bands as if they were fragile bottles. Even the vegetables here travel better than many people. There are young carrots with their tops still on. There are spring onions in bundles. There is sorrel for soups and little baskets of mushrooms from the forcing houses, pale and close as folded umbrellas. A tray follows with eggs from the home farm. Another comes with cream in covered pans and butter pressed into ridged pats. Everything arrives before breakfast as if the land itself keeps proper house hours. One clerk-like soul near the dresser notes the deliveries in a book with blunt pencil marks. Quantity, source, condition. It is a grocery list with ambitions. By dinner, it will have become memory and sauce. You think of the estate as one large stomach with many polite rooms attached. The kitchen garden feeds it first. The dining room only gets the applause. The yard door opens and closes in a steady rhythm. Wet boots bring in cool air and the smell of leaves. The kitchen answers with heat and pastry steam and the damp wool smell of workers at dawn. You can tell the season from the baskets without seeing a calendar at all. Today it reads like late summer pretending to be orderly. Beans lie straight. Tomatoes glow modestly. Marrows wait with the patience of furniture. The produce does not simply appear on plates by magic. It arrives in trugs, in aprons, in stained hands, and in the careful arithmetic of people who know exactly how many mouths sleep upstairs. Augustin comes in after the vegetables, and the room tightens very slightly around him. He is small and neat and fully awake. His apron is white enough to make everyone else feel personally accused. He doesn't raise his voice. He doesn't need to. He touches one crate, glances at another, and says 3 sentences in French that send 4 people moving at once. You learn the shape of his kitchen in the way planets learn the sun. There is a cook for sauces and one for roasts. There is a pastry cook who works with the calm pride of a cathedral mason. There are kitchen maids who wash greens and trim beans and peel heaps of potatoes. There are scullery maids below that level who rule the sink, the pans, and therefore much of human hope. A clean copper pan appears when Augustin wants one, because a scullery maid has already decided to save the morning. A late pan appears when she has not. This is power in its pure domestic form. One young cook minds the breakfast eggs with grave attention. Another trims kidneys and dusts them with spice for divilling. A third skims stock in a corner, as if no hour exists outside the pot. The politics are quiet but very alive. The roast cook thinks pastry has easier work and better scraps. Pastry thinks roast lacks finesse and leaves everything smelling of fat and certainty. Sauce sits highest after Augustin in the daily weather of fear. Sauce may approach the stock pots without asking twice. Sauce may taste and adjust. Sauce also receives blame with almost religious regularity. The kitchen maids move between all of them with bowls and boards and requests. They hear everything. They say little. They know who hides butter, who steals a moment by the yard door, and who cries over onions for reasons not wholly culinary. Augustin mutters in Lyonnais French when someone asks whether the kidneys may be a little plainer. You do not know the words. You know the temperature of them immediately. He regards the English appetite with a private sorrow that never interrupts service. He produces excellent food anyway. It is his burden and his art. Breakfast, you gather, is not the part of the day that excites him. He supervises it because order matters. He feels about the breakfast sideboard as a poet might feel about a shopping list. Even so, he notices everything. He notices a chipped edge on a dish. He notices when the kedgeree needs one more turn with the fork. He notices when a garnish has been placed as if by a tired hand. The hierarchy runs beyond the stove and into the passages. A hallboy waits near the door for bells and messages. A footman comes down for coffee pots and leaves with silver that catches the kitchen light. The housekeeper does not stay in the heat long, but her influence is everywhere. Linens are counted because she wishes it. Tea is locked because she believes in restraint where tea is concerned. You find the order oddly soothing. Every person knows which drawer holds string and which shelf holds nutmeg. Every pan has a hook. Every hook appears to have a memory. The whole room works like a watch made of onions, copper, and human pride. It is more reliable than most modern office charts and comes with fewer meetings. Near the back table, the garden things begin their second life. Beans are snapped into bowls with quick, dry clicks. Herbs are chopped in green drifts. Lettuce is washed in cold water that turns slightly cloudy with the morning. A kitchen maid shells peas into a deep yellow bowl balanced against her apron. The peas strike the bottom with a small, sweet sound. It is one of the nicest sounds in the world when you have nowhere urgent to be. Another maid trims carrots to equal lengths because even vegetables are expected to present themselves properly here. A neat row of imperfect carrots is still considered more alarming than rain on a picnic. Someone picks over sorrel leaves for blemishes. Someone else ties a handful of parsley stalks with string for the stock pot. Nothing is wasted, except perhaps a little patience. The kitchen garden itself may be out behind walls and espaliered fruit and rows of frames. Yet you feel it present here in every damp basket and every smell of bruised green things. You picture gardeners at first light cutting salad while the lawns lie silver with dew. They are the estate's lawn service in every meaningful sense, except the subscription includes boots, cottages, and complete invisibility. When enough has been sorted and stripped and counted, breakfast begins to gather itself into shape. Silver lids go on warming dishes. Toast is sent up in racks with folded napkins to keep it from surrendering too quickly. You leave the kitchen before you become an obstacle with cufflinks. The heat falls away as you step back into the passage. Your skin keeps a pleasant memory of it for several minutes. Upstairs, the house has put on its face. Windows stand brighter now. Beeswax on the floors gives back the morning in soft gold streaks. Somewhere a door opens, and the smell of coffee gets there before the person. The breakfast room is cheerful in a composed and expensive way. Tall sash windows look onto the sweep of gravel and clipped grass. The air carries both fresh coffee and the distant outdoor scratch of work already underway. At each place, a folded copy of the Times waits with cool authority beside the plate. It makes breakfast feel like a private club for people who prefer their news served with toast. The sideboard glows under silver covers and glass domes. It is long enough to count as a route rather than a piece of furniture. You could nearly need directions halfway along. Chafing dishes keep the hotter things alive without tiring them. Their little flames make a faint spirit smell under the richer scents of butter, fish, and coffee. You lift one lid and meet the warm curry-soft scent of kedgeree. Rice, flaked fish, chopped egg, and herbs sit together in yellow comfort. It is a dish built to reassure the British Empire that spice can still be managed politely. Next comes deviled kidneys in a silver dish with a deep lip. The sauce smells of mustard and pepper and something brisk that wakes your nose faster than conversation can. There are rashers kept warm on a folded cloth. There are eggs in several moods, from softly scrambled to sternly boiled and waiting in their stand. Cold things occupy another stretch with equal confidence. Ham lies pink and thin under its blaze. Slices of beef rest dark and exact on a platter. A pressed tongue sits nearby, looking more respectable than its name allows. There is smoked fish set out with wedges of lemon. There are little pots of potted shrimps under buttercaps. There are dishes of marmalade so bright they seem to light themselves. Toast arrives continually and never in sufficient quantity for a room of guests who claim modest appetites. A footman replaces the racks with the solemn rhythm of chapel service. Coffee stands in heavy silver pots near the urn. Tea waits beside it with a less imperial air. Hot milk sits in one jug. Cold cream waits in another because some people insist on treating coffee like dessert before 9. Mr. Hobbs appears near your elbow exactly when you begin to look for a spoon. He hands you one without visible motion. His face remains calm. His eyebrow rests in its normal low pasture for now. You suspect he can sense need through wallpaper. If telegraph cables ever fail, the country might simply connect London to Mr. Hobbs and carry on. The room fills gently with guests who have already dressed to be seen appearing natural. Silk rustles, cuffs shine, chairs move over the floor with the quiet scrape of money being very careful. Lady Ashworth enters with the settled air of a woman prepared to find both fault and pleasure before her first cup. She inspects the sideboard in sections, as if granting approval to a fleet. You watch her pause before the kedgeree with professional interest. She has the expression of a bishop approaching doctrine. A spoon hovers above the dish. Judgment gathers. She serves herself a careful portion and retreats to the table with it. 2 bites later, she delivers her view to the room at large. She says the rice is separate enough. She says the fish has not been bullied. She says too many houses make kedgeree like damp upholstery. This, from Lady Ashworth, is close to a hymn of praise. Several guests look relieved without admitting they had been waiting. Mr. Hobbs pours coffee as if nothing historic has occurred. She continues, because naturally she does. She remarks that the curry is present, but not impertinent. She notes that the chopped egg has been distributed sensibly and not in sentimental lumps. You begin to understand that country house breakfast has its own theology and many sects. Kedgeree alone seems able to start a doctrinal dispute before the marmalade has settled. Mr. Hobbs passes behind Lady Ashworth when she asks for more lemon with her fish. The lemon is somehow already there. A faint eyebrow rises only when she salts before tasting. The eyebrow remains aloft for several breaths. It is a small masterpiece of social architecture. You half expect it to be listed in the household inventory under silver and porcelain. Around you, the papers unfold with a dry, soft crackle. The room enters that polite breakfast silence where everyone reads and chews and occasionally says one sentence as if through a hedge. You butter toast and look again at the sideboard. It is only breakfast, and yet it has required a fire tended before dawn, gardens harvested at first light, silver polished, dishes counted, and half the estate briefly aligned like planets. Augustin would likely call it routine and mean it. He would also likely consider it the least interesting thing he sends upstairs all day, which tells you almost too much about dinner. A footman changes out one dish for another, so smoothly you barely see the exchange. Fresh kidneys take the place of those already claimed. New toast appears. Coffee is renewed. Nothing seems to finish. It merely rotates. Biscuit, the elderly spaniel, appears at the door with an expression of lawful optimism. He is banned from the principal rooms, though this appears to be news he receives daily and rejects on principle. He lowers himself to the threshold with a sigh that suggests former rights and present injustice. His nose points directly toward the kidneys. His eyes move from plate to plate with pious concentration. A maid makes a tiny shooing motion. Biscuit absorbs it as abstract art. He remains where he is, hopeful and entirely unread in both English and French. Lady Ashworth notices him and says that dogs always know where the best table is kept. Mr. Hobbs does not reply. His eyebrow gives one brief, thoughtful lift and then retires. You eat slowly because the room invites slowness and because there is so much to notice. Butter softens on warm toast. Coffee cools in the cup. Sunlight inches along the cloth and catches the edge of a knife. Outside, the gardeners are already at work on lawns and beds you will later stroll past, as if they arrange themselves. Inside the kitchen, the range still burns for luncheon, and then dinner, and then the bread for tomorrow. Somewhere below stairs, the junior maid is likely feeding that great iron mouth again. She will rake clinker from one side and add coal to another. She will do it so neatly that no guest ever thinks of her while choosing marmalade. Yet you think of her now, each time a silver lid lifts and releases a little cloud. The whole breakfast seems to rise from that hidden fire in orderly waves. The estate begins to make more sense when you see this. Grandeur here is not one dazzling moment. It is 1,000 warm, scrubbed, peeled, folded, carried things that happen before you come downstairs. You finish your coffee and fold your newspaper a little more neatly than you found it. The house around you moves on without hurry. Breakfast fades into morning, with the smooth confidence of a fire no one is allowed to let die. You meet Mr. Perkins on the south terrace, while the breakfast room still murmurs behind the glass. He holds his hat in one hand and a small knife in the other. The knife is for cuttings, not drama. He tells you the Orchid house comes last, in the tone of a church rule. Lady Ashworth arrives a little late and looks at the sky, as if she has ordered better. She says a proper estate should begin with the rose garden. Mr. Perkins says nothing at all, which is somehow a full reply. You walk down wide steps that still smell faintly of last night's damp stone. The beeswax polish from the hall follows you out in a soft, clean thread. Ahead, the park opens in layers of green and pale gravel. The house sits behind you like a patient machine that has already started the day's work. Perkins points with 2 fingers and gives the grounds in ranks. First parkland, then kitchen garden, then fruit under glass, then the Orchid house. You begin to suspect he has sorted the world into proper shelves. The gravel path gives a steady crunch under your boots. Somewhere farther off, another path answers with the same careful sound. That second sound comes from men raking the drive after the early carts. Mr. Perkins tells you the main sweep is done at dawn. It is touched again before luncheon if too many wheels have spoiled the pattern. You look more closely and see that the park is full of work you almost miss. A man trims the edge where grass meets path. Another lifts stray twigs into a barrow without once pausing to admire the view. The great smooth lawn looks natural in the way a folded napkin looks effortless. It takes many hands and a strict memory. The estate is, in every useful sense, a Victorian lawn care subscription service. The men receive no little paper stars for their service. They receive weather, early hours, and the hope that nobody notices a missed strip. Mr. Perkins seems pleased that you notice them at all. He names under gardeners, a mower boy, men for the drives, and men for the water. Each part of the green world has its own keeper. You come to the edge of the ha-ha and almost smile at the name alone. It is a dry ditch with a hidden wall. It keeps grazing animals out and leaves the view looking innocent. Lady Ashworth says she has always found the thing theatrical. Mr. Perkins says it is practical first. He says this with the calm firmness of a man who has explained ha-has for many summers. You stand at the rim and look across open turf to a distant belt of trees. No fence interrupts the eye. The trick works so well that your mind keeps reaching for a missing line. At the lake, the air cools by 1 useful degree. The surface lies flat, except where a duck draws a slow stitch. Mr. Perkins tells you the edges are cut on a weekly plan. The reeds are thinned before they get ideas. Falling branches are fished out by a man in a punt whose job sounds much dreamier than it is. Near the boathouse, 2 men pull weed from the shallows with long rakes. The wet stems heap on the bank like green lace. By afternoon, they will be carted away and rot into future warmth elsewhere. You notice how the water reflects the house only from certain angles. Mr. Perkins says that is not an accident. He says a great estate must always know which face it is showing. The distant deer look like decorations placed just so. Then one lowers its head and proves itself practical. Even the pretty parts are expected to behave. The trees along the carriage turn are limbed high for a long sightline. The lower growth is kept neat where guests pass. Wilder corners are allowed where guests do not, which feels almost modern. A bell sounds faintly from the house and dies in the air. You think of trays moving, linens airing, letters being sorted like Victorian email. The place keeps breathing behind you while you walk. Mr. Perkins does not hurry. He stops to show you a patched place in the turf where crows have been lively. He speaks of reseeding with the grave tone other men reserve for state matters. On the far side of the park, you pass a row of young trees tied to stakes. Each tie is checked before it bites the bark. Neglect here is not a dramatic fall. It is a slow rub no one bothered to notice. A side gate in a high brick wall changes the whole day at once. The park falls away behind you. The air grows warmer and smells of leaves, damp soil, and useful abundance. Inside the walled kitchen garden, everything stands closer and more intent. Beds hold their lines like well-made drawers. The walls gather sun and keep it. Mr. Perkins lays his palm on the brick and asks you to do the same. The warmth has stayed from yesterday and from the morning, stored like quiet savings. Along the south wall, pears lie flat against wires in careful arms. Their branches are tied so neatly that you feel clumsy merely looking at them. Fan-trained peaches spread wider nearby, each branch placed with soft authority. Some fruit is wrapped in little nets against birds and wasps. The fuzzy skins blush through the mesh like embarrassed royalty. Lady Ashworth says her brother's gardener gets finer apricots from a lesser wall. Mr. Perkins replies that lesser walls can occasionally surprise one. His face stays polite. His meaning does not. You move between rows of peas already picked clean at one end. The morning harvest has gone to the house. Short sticks mark the next sowing, so the kitchen never falls into a gap. There are lettuces in several stages at once. The small ones are still crisp fists. The larger ones are tied up with raffia, so their hearts stay pale and sweet. Beans climb poles in green ropes above your head. Mr. Perkins snaps one open and shows you how flat the seeds still are. He says Augustine wants them before they become self-important. A boy passes with a trug full of herbs and does not waste a step. Parsley lies over mint. Chervil sits beside tarragon, like a clever friend from abroad. You smell tomato vines, though the fruits themselves hide under leaf and twine. They are not for the open ground here. They live in a warmer strip near glass and are treated with a touch of flattery. At the far end, celery stands in trenches with its earth banked high. The smell is sharp and clean. It makes the whole corner feel like a salad, trying to become architecture. Mr. Perkins lifts the lid of a forcing frame and lets you peer inside. Warm air touches your face at once. The glass is beaded inside from the night's breath. Under the frame, small plants sit in a private spring. Heat rises from fermenting manure packed below the soil. It is one of those old methods that sounds like a prank and works splendidly. He shows you hand lights lined in a row over low things that need shelter. Straw mats hang ready nearby for cold nights. The garden keeps blankets, just like the house, though the residents are less grateful. You pass a long table near the potting shed where produce is set out and counted. Baskets wait for peas, peaches, cucumbers, and currants. A slate holds neat chalk marks that turn breakfast wishes into kitchen fact. Mr. Perkins says the head kitchen gardener sends a list up every morning before 9. What ripens decides part of luncheon. Augustine pretends to command nature, but nature still submits a memo first. The currant bushes are netted in blue and white. The fruit hangs inside like little lamps. You can almost feel the pudding already forming around them. Near one path, figs grow against a warm wall, with broad hands of leaves. Their smell is dusty and sweet. The small green fruit hide in the joints like secrets that are actually very well catalogued. You notice how every bed carries labels and dates. Sowing, thinning, lifting, cutting. Nothing depends on noble instinct alone. The kitchen garden is less a patch of vegetables than a clock with roots. One hand points to luncheon, another points quietly to Michaelmas and winter soups. When you leave by the inner door, the heat follows for a moment. Then another kind of warmth rises ahead from glass and brick. The pinery sits low and long, with windows that shine white in the sun. Inside, the air turns close and rich. It smells of warm boards, damp bark, and sugar thinking ahead. Perkins grows almost tender when he speaks here. Pineapples take patience of an expensive kind. They also take fuel, watchfulness, and a willingness to defend them from curious fingers. The plants stand in ordered ranks, each in its own pot sunk into a bed. The bed is warm beneath, fed by steady heat. Some estates still use tan and manure for much of it, though pipes now assist. You bend to one fruit and see the pattern of its skin begin to swell. It wears its little crown with comic self-importance. It looks like a king dressed for a pudding. Mr. Perkins says, a pineapple takes many months merely to become promising. Then it takes more months to become worth serving. It is not a fruit, so much as a long and costly opinion. Warm water stands ready in a barrel, so the roots are never shocked. Thermometers hang where the men can see them at a glance. Ventilators are opened by inches, never by moods. Along the rafters in the next house, grapes loop in broad leaves above your head. Their bunches hang under gauze bags to keep off wasps and dust. The filtered light turns the whole room green and sleepy. Farther on, melons swell on little tiles, so damp soil will not spoil them. Some rest in nets from the frame above. They look cradled and faintly spoiled, which in fairness they are. A narrow house nearby holds peaches and nectarines under glass for an earlier crop. The leaves are thin and bright. The fruit is turned by hand, so one side does not take all the glory. You ask if the table always has such things. Mr. Perkins says, not always. Then he adds that there is usually something from glass when the outdoors sulks. That answer feels like the entire estate in one sentence. If one season refuses, another is manufactured nearby with coal and skill. Biscuit appears at this point from nowhere obvious and sits in the doorway panting. His ears are full of burrs, and his expression suggests a man who has inspected matters thoroughly. Mr. Perkins says he is not to be in here, which Biscuit receives as weather. The dog sniffs one fallen vine leaf and thinks better of it. Then he wanders after a gardener with the confident drift of a retired minor official. No one stops him for long. At the far end of the glass range, a door stands shut with unusual dignity. Condensation purls along its panes. Even before it opens, the air around it feels thicker. Mr. Perkins puts his hand on the latch and gives you a look of mild warning. The orchid house is last because it is the point. The rest has prepared your eyes, as a sermon prepares a hymn. Inside, warm, wet air folds around you at once. Your glasses would mist if you wore them. The gravel underfoot is dark from constant damping. The house breathes with soft drips and little ticks from metal warming and cooling. Leaves shine as if freshly polished. Some are broad and heavy. Others are narrow and arching like careful handwriting. The smell is not one smell at all. There is moss, bark, damp wood, warm brick, and a faint sweetness that comes and goes. It feels less like entering a room and more like walking into weather. Pipes run low along the sides, carrying heat from the boiler house. A tank of water stands ready, so syringing can be done at the right temperature. Cold water, Mr. Perkins says, is a common act of foolishness. He points upward to the vents set along the ridge. They are opened in measured degrees according to cloud, wind, and hour. Too much air chills the plants. Too little invites stale damp and sulks. Shading is rolled partway across the glass, where noon would strike too hard. Mats and thin wash on the panes soften the fiercest sun. Even light here must be trained like a servant. The orchids stand on stages, hang in baskets, and perch on blocks of bark. Some roots dangle freely and look untidy in a very expensive way. Others sit in pots packed with rough pieces that hold air as much as moisture. Mr. Perkins says one house is never enough for orchids, not if you mean to keep them well. This bay stays warmer. That bay stays cooler. A third is for resting plants that have finished their show and need less fuss. He speaks of stove heat, intermediate heat, and cool treatment with plain devotion. You realize the estate runs several climates before noon. England remains outside doing its best. The Orchid House is essentially the estate's Instagram account, though no one calls it that yet. Visitors admire. Owners glow quietly. Mr. Perkins serves as a full-time content moderator who permits no touching whatsoever. Labels sit by each plant in a tiny clear hand. Some names seem long enough to need their own luggage. Perkins pronounces them all with care and without apology. He tells you the best flowers are rotated forward when company fills the house. Plants past their peak are moved back to recover. New arrivals are watched apart for pests, like guests with suspicious habits. Some specimens have come from dealers in London. Others have crossed oceans in crates with moss packed around their roots. A few have survived beautifully and now behave as if they invented the premises. One shelf holds plants not presently in bloom, which feels almost intimate. Their leaves matter here as much as their flowers. Mr. Perkins values future promise with a stern and equal love. He lifts a hanging basket slightly and shows you tiny new growth at the base. It is no bigger than your thumb joint. He regards it with more hope than some men show a nephew. The paths are sprinkled several times a day in warm weather to keep the air from turning dry. In winter, the house is managed almost by the clock. Fires, pipes, vents, and water all have their hour. A small notebook lives on a shelf near the door. In it, temperatures are written down morning and evening. Rare blooms are noted. Losses are recorded too, without fuss and without forgetting. Lady Ashworth says the flowers are all very handsome but rather alike at a glance. Silence follows for one beat. Then Mr. Perkins turns toward her with the patient brightness of a trap closing politely. He invites you both to inspect two plants set side by side. Their blooms are indeed pinkish and grand. To your untaught eye, they differ mainly in being two orchids in one house. Mr. Perkins explains that one is a cattleya and the other is not. Then he explains how you can tell by the lip, the cane, the leaf habit, the way it grows, and the season of bloom. He explains the pseudobulb with the care of a man introducing family. He explains the roots, which seem to him eloquent. He explains that confusion between these specimens is understandable, but only just. You stand very still while 11 minutes pass in a soft, warm cloud. Time here becomes syrup. The orchids listen without judgment. Lady Ashworth nods twice and says she sees it now. You suspect she sees only survival. Mr. Perkins, having restored order to the moral universe, looks gentler at once. Privately, you do begin to notice the differences. One flower sits broader and flatter. The other rises with a little twist at the lip. Attention, it seems, is a kind of hospitality the plants expect. He leads you onward to a plant with pale green petals and a scent like vanilla left near rain. Another smells faintly of cloves. A third smells of almost nothing at all and relies on shape to make its point. Not every plant blooms together. That would be too easy and far too theatrical for Mr. Perkins's taste. There is a roster, a patient relay, so that some treasure is always coming on while another fades back. He shows you one bench where spikes are just forming. Another holds plants nearly done, soon to be moved away from prime position. The room changes by weeks, not by accidents. A gardener enters with a can fitted for a fine rose and nods to you once. He waters the path, not the blooms. The leaves receive a mist. The flowers do not, because beauty here also has rules. From somewhere beyond the glass you hear a wheelbarrow and the distant scrape of a rake. The whole estate seems to answer the orchid house from afar. Outside men flatten gravel. Inside men regulate tropical air. You ask whether the house ever becomes too warm in high summer. Mr. Perkins says that is what shade, vents, damping down, and vigilance are for. He makes vigilance sound like a liquid kept in barrels. At one end, a bench holds orchids newly arrived and not yet trusted among the rest. Their tags are fresh. Their leaves carry travel stains. They look like guests still unpacking. Mr. Perkins says some thrive at once and some pout for months. Rare plants, he adds, are often like distinguished visitors. They require the correct room, the correct temperature, and the firm belief that inconvenience is affection. That line almost makes Lady Ashworth smile. Almost is all you get from her before noon. In this, too, the estate maintains standards. You stop near a flower with petals the color of old ivory and a throat of purple velvet. The light through the glass turns it unreal and very exact. For a moment, you understand perfectly why whole houses are heated for such things. Then the feeling settles into something calmer. It is not only display. It is lists, coal, pipes, watering cans, notes, wages, pruning knives, and men who remember which vent sticks in east wind. The glamour here sits on top of routine like cream on milk. Mr. Perkins seems happiest when he can show you the milk. When you finally step back outside, Buckinghamshire feels large, dry, and almost plain. The cool air touches your face like fresh linen. Your sleeves carry a faint green damp from the house. Beyond the glass, the orchid leaves gleam in their managed weather. Ahead, the paths return to gravel and brick and honest dirt. Behind everything, luncheon inches closer on dozens of quiet feet. You begin to understand the estate by walking it in this order. First the wide view, then the useful beds, then the hot glass, then the flowers that exist because all the rest works. Mr. Perkins settles his hat and seems content at last. He has not shown you a garden, he has shown you a system with petals. As you turn back toward the house, a footman appears at the corner with exactly the shawl Lady Ashworth has just begun to want. Mr. Hobbs must have sent him by instinct or secret wire. Somewhere behind a window, you can almost feel the butler's eyebrow lifting into its working position. The gravel answers under your feet in the same measured crunch as before. Nothing in the grounds is hurried. Everything is already on time. The air changes halfway down the service stair. The warmth of the drawing room drops away behind you. A cool smell of stone, cork, and lamp oil rises to meet you. You keep one hand on the smooth rail as you descend. The steps are shallow in the middle from many careful feet. The house seems to breathe differently down here. Above you, life is soft carpets and low talk. Below you, life is doors, ledgers, and quiet purpose. Even the silence feels arranged by someone with a key. The house steward waits at the foot of the stairs. He stands beside a table with a shaded lamp and a stack of folded papers. His coat is plain black and beautifully brushed. He has the look of a man who can tell, at a glance, how many candles remain in the blue drawing room. He also looks like he sleeps in neat columns. You suspect his dreams balance perfectly. He inclines his head and turns toward the cellar passage. The floor changes from wood to worn flagstone. The sound under your feet grows smaller and more private. The cellar door is thick and padded with old felt around the frame. When it opens, a pocket of cool air slips past your face. It smells faintly of damp earth and sleeping grapes. Inside, the bottles lie on their sides in long wooden bins. Their shoulders catch a little lamplight through furred coats of dust. Chalk marks bloom on the dark ends like brief little notes. The walls are very thick and very patient. Small high vents let air move without inviting sun. The steward says light is rude to wine, which feels almost personal. You follow him between rows labeled in a tidy hand. Bordeaux sits in one stretch. Burgundy keeps to another. Champagne rests deeper in where the temperature holds steady through summer afternoons. The place feels less like a cave than a library. Every bottle reclines in strict order and perfect calm. It is a room built for waiting without complaint. The steward lifts one bottle and turns it gently. He checks the level beneath the cork with the concentration of a watchmaker. Then he sets it back with a soft, respectful thud. He shows you the leather-bound inventory ledger on a narrow oak stand. The book is heavy and slightly warm from his hand. Its pages are ruled in red and blue lines. Each bottle has a place, a date, and a purpose. Vintage sits beside shipper. Condition sits beside quantity. Occasion sits beside all of them like a quietly useful aunt. You read notes for house dinners and small family suppers. You read notes for picnics, for town guests, and for gentlemen who claim they prefer something modest. The steward's handwriting suggests he believes none of them. A page near the middle carries remarks in finer script. One bottle is marked too young for present use. Another is reserved for a silver wedding. A third is suitable for cold pheasant, which sounds very certain of itself. You realize the ledger is a 19th century spreadsheet in leather boots. A modern wine merchant would recognize it at once. Then they would likely sit down and have a little cry. The steward seems pleased by none of this. He turns another page and points to small symbols in the margin. A circle means recorked, a cross means moved, a neat dash means opened and accounted for. Nothing is merely taken from these bins. Everything travels on paper before it travels upstairs. The bottle reaches the table only after the page has agreed. The floor underfoot is sprinkled with fresh sand in patches. It keeps damp from gathering where boots pause too long. It also makes every step sound soft and sleepy. At the far end, a narrower chamber holds the sweeter wines. The air there is a touch richer and less stern. Even the dust seems more pleased with itself. You smell cork, old wood, and something faintly fruity beneath both. It is not the sharp smell of a tavern. It is cleaner and slower, like fruit remembered rather than fruit eaten. The steward explains the coolest bins are given to the most delicate bottles. The stronger wines can endure a little variation without offense. Even here, rank has a seating plan. Then you see Biscuit. He is sitting beside a crate marked for Hock. His ears droop with innocent dignity. His nose points toward a basket that once held cheese and now holds only a memory. No one knows how he gets below stairs. No one admits to assisting him. Biscuit, for his part, offers no statement. The steward pauses with admirable self-command. He looks at the dog, then at the closed door, then back at the dog. You can almost hear a note entering tomorrow's account book under mysterious losses. Biscuit rises, stretches, and wags once. Dust glows briefly from his coat in the lamplight. Then he settles again as if he is the cellar's oldest and most trusted inspector. You leave him to his confidential duties. The steward closes the ledger with a soft, final sound. It feels like the end of a church service for bottles. The next room is brighter and much less forgiving. Shelves and drawers line the walls from floor to ceiling. Every surface gives back a dim, corrected version of your face. This is the silver pantry. It smells of metal, soap, and clean cloth. The air carries the dry, chalky scent of polishing powder. The under-butler is already at work for the evening. He stands at a long, baize-covered table, with sleeves protected by linen guards. In front of him lies a rank of candlesticks, awaiting improvement. He rubs each piece with a cloth until the dull bloom lifts. Then he buffs the surface with a second cloth to a hard moonshine. The motion is steady and almost gentle. He does not hurry, because hurry leaves finger marks. He does not chat, because chat invites breath. Silver, you learn, prefers respect and very little personality. Drawers slide out to reveal spoons, sorted by size and use. Larger ones rest in one line. Tiny salt spoons live in another. Fish knives lie together with their own somewhat smug faces. The serving pieces have their own order too. Soup ladles lie near sauce ladles, but not with them. Grape scissors rest in a tray, like an object from a polite dream. Each item carries the family crest. Tiny lions, crowns, and initials appear on handles and lids. Even the asparagus tongs seem to know exactly whom they serve. The under-butler counts as he polishes. 6 dinner forks for each place. Dessert forks separate. Teaspoons, coffee spoons, and odd little pieces for foods you only meet in great houses. He keeps a small notebook by his elbow. In it he records what goes upstairs and what returns. Nothing vanishes into a napkin by accident on his watch. The ritual happens nightly whether guests notice or not. Candle soot settles on branches. Fingertips bloom on covers. Gravy leaves claims where silver meets serving dish. By morning, every mark is erased. The breakfast table appears as if metal naturally wakes in perfect condition. It is one of the house's more charming lies. You think of the beeswax-polished parquet above, and the gaslit chandeliers mirrored in all this silver. Upstairs shines because downstairs rubs. The house runs on friction, polish, and very good memory. At one end of the pantry, larger pieces wait on lower shelves. Great salvers stand upright in slots. Covered vegetable dishes sleep beneath cloths like obedient helmets. There is even a warming cupboard for plates and some serving vessels. Not every item enjoys the same treatment. The under-butler speaks of heat and tarnish with the gravity others reserve for weather. A tray stands ready for afternoon tea. Cups will travel from the china room. The silver pot, sugar basin, and milk jug wait here in formation. Service begins long before anyone asks for anything. You mention that Mr. Hobbs always appears one moment before a need becomes visible. The under-butler allows himself a tiny smile. He says this is because Mr. Hobbs considers time a servant and expects obedience. Somewhere upstairs you imagine that famous eyebrow lifting over a badly chosen spoon. It may already be hovering over Lady Ashworth, who once used a pickle fork with salmon. The eyebrow probably deserves a rest cure in bath. The silver pantry door opens and closes with careful softness. Footmen pass in and out, each with a tray or a list. The movement is brisk but never flurried. You begin to see the shape of the house in reverse. Above stairs, people glide and sit and ring. Below stairs, hands count, warm, polish, fold, fetch, and return. The linen room waits farther along the corridor, where the air grows drier and warmer. Here the smell changes to soap, starch, lavender, and ironed cotton. It is a very clean sort of comfort. Shelves rise in ranks to the ceiling. They hold sheets, towels, tablecloths, pillowcases, napkins, and blankets in deep white stacks. The room looks like a quiet snowfall that someone has sorted. The housekeeper stands near a tall press with her chatelaine at her waist. The keys hang from it in a small, bright cluster. They chime softly when she turns. She chooses keys without looking down. Each lock yields to exactly one small twist. It is the kind of skill that makes you feel your own pockets are badly organized. The finest sheets are stored in the driest inner cupboards. They are smooth and close-woven and marked for the principal family rooms. Favored guests receive nearly the same, which is a compliment in cotton form. Other cupboards hold good everyday linen for lesser bedrooms and upper passages. Schoolroom stores are plainer. Servants' sheets are sturdy and much mended. Even fabric here understands the ladder of the house. Nothing is wasted once it thins. A worn sheet becomes pillow slips. A tired pillow slip becomes polishing cloth. In old age, a distinguished napkin may end by dusting a window with admirable humility. The housekeeper shows you table linen folded around cardboard forms to keep sharp edges. Damask cloths are marked by size and room. One belongs to the family dining room. Another is meant for a smaller breakfast table. Napkins lie in high stacks with a faint scent of starch. Some carry tiny stitched numbers in red thread. If one goes astray, the laundry can be made to answer for it. Guest towels are grouped by room and by pattern. Bath sheets are thick and fewer. Hand towels are many and constantly moving. Even a week's visit creates a tide of linen nobody mentions at dinner. The room has its own weather. Warm pipes keep damp away from the cupboards. Airing frames stand ready for blankets that need freshening before a bed is dressed. 2 housemaids arrive with baskets on their arms. One waits by the door, while the other steps forward. Rank reaches even here, where everyone handles soap and pillowcases. The senior maid speaks directly to the housekeeper and receives the keys. The junior maid receives folded bundles and a quick instruction. The difference is small, but plain as daylight. You watch bed linen leave for the best guest rooms in careful piles. Counterpanes travel separately so they do not crush. Pillow covers rest on top like the last clean thought of the stack. The housekeeper records each issue in a small ruled book. Room number goes first. Quantity follows. Damage, if any, earns a note in the margin, and a future conversation nobody wants. She speaks of airing a bed as if it is half medicine and half manners. Sheets must feel dry at once. Blankets must not smell of chest or cupboard. A great house can forgive many things, though apparently not clammy linen. You run your fingers lightly over a folded towel she offers. It is firm from pressing and surprisingly soft at the edge. Comfort here has been ironed into shape. A drawer opens to reveal guest napkins with rings beside them. Another holds tea cloths and glass cloths separate from all others. Nothing mingles without permission. The keys at the housekeeper's waist swing again as she crosses the room. They sound like a private little orchestra for order. You begin to suspect the entire estate is held together by metal objects on hooks. From the linen room, the steward leads you to his office. It is smaller than you expect and more crowded than any drawing room. Shelves of account books climb one wall from floor to ceiling. A tall desk stands under the lamp, with a stool beside it for shorter work. The inkstand is square and severe. Sand for drying ink sits in a lidded shaker close at hand. This is where the house becomes arithmetic. The steward opens a ledger, and the day unfolds in columns. Coal, candles, fish, flour, cream, postage, soap, lamp oil, and boot black all have their line. The entries are made in a clear hand that wastes no loops. A side of beef appears beside its cost. 40 eggs appear beside their supplier. A note marks payment due for hothouse fuel. Because even orchids dislike economy. You think of the orchid house above the lawns. It is essentially the estate's Instagram account. Mr. Perkins curates it with damp zeal and zero tolerance for touching. Here, though, the orchids become figures. Coke for boilers sits beside broken panes, replaced after wind. Twine, pots, and loam each earn their own sober mention. Retainers are listed for tradesmen who supply the house through the year. The butcher has his line. The fishmonger has his. So do the baker, coal merchant, wine shipper, and the man who sharpens knives with theatrical misery. Some suppliers send weekly bills. Others settle monthly. The steward notes what has arrived, what has been checked, and what has been disputed in a hand no one would wish to argue with. Household wages sit in a separate book with narrower columns and greater care. The butler, housekeeper, cook, coachman, and steward himself appear near the top. Under them come footmen, maids, grooms, kitchen girls, and boys. You can feel the structure of the house in the spacing of names. The upper servants have broader lines and remarks beside them. The lower ones are packed closer, like lives lived under tighter lids. Some wages are paid partly in cash and partly in board and lodging. Liveried men receive allowances for upkeep. Women who mend are noted for extra work in heavy guest weeks. The steward keeps track of breakages with a composure that feels almost holy. 1 cracked lamp chimney, 2 chipped plates, 3 extra candles in the blue room after cards ran long. He also keeps memoranda of what each entertainment requires. A dinner for 14 means more cream, more flowers, more coals, and more hands in the pantry. A quiet family supper still leaves a surprisingly long paper trail. You realize that grandeur is mostly receipts wearing a handsome face. The chandeliers glitter upstairs because somebody below has entered tallow, gas, and wick trimming at sensible intervals. Splendor, in practice, is very clerical. A small locked drawer holds household cash for daily use. Another stores signed bills awaiting the master's review. Nothing about the system feels accidental, though much of it must feel endless. The steward turns to a page for wages due at week's end. Beside several names are notes for advances, family illness, or extra duties. The entries are brief and businesslike, yet oddly human. He does not gossip about the people he pays. He simply knows who needs boots. He knows who sends money home. He knows who can be trusted with keys and who should never be left near decanters. On a side shelf lie bundles of older ledgers tied with tape. Their spines show years in fading gold. The whole household sits there in paper layers, season after season, soup after soup. You imagine someone opening them a century later. They would see candles rise in winter and strawberries appear in June. They would know from bills alone when guests came, when rooms shut, and when a dog likely found the cheese again. The office opens onto a passage that joins several working rooms. You stand there for a moment and listen. Bells tinkle faintly. A pan lid rings in the far kitchen. Shoes pass overhead like polite weather. Below stairs has its own map of importance. The butler's room and housekeeper's room are placed with quiet authority. The steward's office sits near stores and traffic, because money must hear everything. The still room has one rhythm. The kitchen has another. The servants' hall waits farther off with benches and a long table. Even rest seems arranged by rank and doorway. Senior servants move with keys, lists, and some private silence. Junior servants carry, scrub, peel, blockade, and run messages in straight lines. The house above has drawing room corners. The parallel is almost exact once you see it. Upstairs, the family receives guests according to precedence. Downstairs, meals are served and seats are taken by a similar, quieter law. The butler and housekeeper dine apart from the younger staff. The cook does not surrender her authority merely because she sits. Footmen and housemaids know where to place themselves long before the plates arrive. You pass a row of pegs holding outdoor coats for workmen and maids. Boots stand beneath on trays, each pair brushed and waiting. Even mud has assigned quarters. At another turn, a maid carries hot water to an upper floor. A hall boy bears coal in a scuttle almost half his size. They move aside for the steward without thinking, like water parting around a stone. It is not unkind exactly. It is simply complete. The house knows who may open which door and who must knock first. This order mirrors the guest rooms, the dining table, and the morning calls upstairs. You begin to understand that the estate is one machine with two polished faces. One face receives thanks, the other remembers where the napkins are kept. From somewhere near the back corridor comes a soft scrape and an unmistakable sniff. Biscuit appears again, carrying a look of deep administrative concern. He has acquired a bit of string and no explanation. The steward closes his eyes for one calm second. Then he opens them and says that the spaniel is not, to his knowledge, on wages. It is possible the dog believes otherwise. Biscuit wanders on toward the warmth of the kitchen regions. He passes through the hierarchy like a minor aristocrat, accountable to nobody. You cannot help admiring the technique. As you turn back toward the stair, a footman goes by with polished salvers for the evening. A maid follows with fresh towels for dressing rooms. Above, candles will soon be lit and curtains drawn. The house is preparing its calm face again. Silver will gleam, beds will cool and then warm, bottles will rise from their bins exactly when the page allows. You climb slowly, carrying the chill of the cellar on your sleeves. The smell of linen soap fades behind you. Ahead comes beeswax, flowers, and a hint of dinner from Augustine's realm. When you reach the upper passage, Mr. Hobbs appears at your elbow with impossible timing. He asks whether you found the lower offices interesting. His face is composed, though the eyebrow suggests he already knows about Biscuit. You say that everything below stairs seems to run with miraculous ease. Mr. Hobbs lets the eyebrow hover in thoughtful correction. Then he says, very gently, that ease is what it looks like from above. That seems to be the whole secret of the estate. Nothing is simple, though everything is made to feel so. You walk back toward the lamplight knowing a little more about the machinery of comfort and feeling oddly soothed by every key, bottle, and path. Spoon and folded sheet. The first letter you hear about all day arrives before you wake. At 6 a.m, while you still sleep under cool linen sheets, a private courier reaches the side entrance with a sealed leather case. You learn this after luncheon. In the mild and almost dreamy way great houses deliver important news. Mr. Hobbs mentions it while placing a small salver beside your teacup, as if dawn dispatches from the city are no more startling than marmalade. His voice stays smooth and level. Only his eyebrow rises a little when Lady Ashworth asks whether the fellow really came before the breakfast trays. He did come before the breakfast trays. He comes through the mist with road dust on his boots and a strap mark across his coat shoulder. The porter admits him by the servant's door, not the front, because money prefers side passages to grand entrances. The leather case bears 2 locks and a brass plate. The seals sit thick and dark at the flap, each stamp pressed so cleanly it looks almost edible. The case goes at once to the business room near the library. It does not wait politely with the rest of the post in the hall. That is the small lesson the house gives you today. There is ordinary post for ordinary people, and then there is Rothschild post, which keeps its own weather and its own sunrise. The dispatch from London comes first. A second bundle follows from the station later in the morning, carrying papers forwarded from Frankfurt and the continent. You picture the chain of hands with sleepy wonder. A clerk folds thin sheets on narrow paper, another ties them with tape, and another writes careful numbers in a ledger. By the time you pour your first coffee, figures have already crossed counties and frontiers. They travel with more purpose than most dinner guests. In the breakfast room, nobody speaks much of this early traffic. The silver covers lift, kidneys steam gently, and the toast racks stand in orderly rows like patient little fences. The family reads as they eat. Some letters arrive on blue paper, some on cream, and some in envelopes so thin the writing ghosts through. You notice how quickly the important ones vanish. A secretary appears at the doorway, receives a sheet without fuss, and disappears again before the muffins cool. It feels less like drama than housekeeping. The estate runs on paper as surely as it runs on coal, beeswax, and the endless distant crunch of raked gravel. Lady Ashworth finds the whole arrangement deeply impressive, which annoys her more than if she disliked it. She says her own brother receives excellent post, though perhaps not from Frankfurt, before the household has finished yawning. Mr. Hobbs places fresh butter by her plate, with exact calm. His eyebrow hovers for a notable interval. By the time the coffee urn loses its first brisk heat, the early dispatch has already done its work. Notes go to the steward, figures go to the study, and one brief message goes back toward London by return hand. You never see anyone rush. You see only doors open and close, and paper move with the quiet speed of fish under dark water. After luncheon, you drift toward the morning room, because that is where paper settles into its afternoon life. The room faces a gentler lawn and receives a kind, steady light that forgives blotches and bad penmanship. A fire rests low in the grate. The air smells of sealing wax, tea roses, and the faint starch of freshly ironed curtains. On the writing table, everything waits in ranks. There's thick cream paper with the house crest, thinner sheets for everyday use, and envelopes in 3 sizes. A brass inkstand anchors the center like a little dark pond. Beside it sit steel nibs, a bone paper knife, a stick of red wax, and a single wax seal waiting at the corner. That is the next page in the story. And a pad of blotting paper. There is a pen wiper shaped like a small cushion. You touch it with one finger and feel silk gone a bit greasy from honest use. A tray holds calling cards with names printed in sober black. Another tray holds unanswered letters, stacked face down, because even wealth cannot look at everything at once. You take a place near the window. The sash stands slightly raised, and from outside comes the soft scrape of gravel and the clink of distant garden tools. The orchid houses lie beyond a clipped yew walk. Their glass shines pale in the afternoon, like the estate's own impossibly costly Instagram account, only with more coal. Mr. Perkins passes there with a basket and a length of cane. Even at this distance, he looks ready to explain a Catalea to any living creature unable to flee. In the morning room, the great business of seeming unhurried begins. Lady Ashworth composes notes with a face usually reserved for battlefield maps and underdone fish. You write a small reply to a cousin who envies your visit. Your first line takes longer than expected. The house crest at the top of the page makes every sentence feel slightly more responsible. A maid brings fresh sanded blotters and removes a cup that has left a pale ring on a side table. Nobody remarks on the ring. The table will survive, because the house employs polish in quantities usually granted to navies. Across from you, one of the younger ladies sorts letters by hand. Family first to the left, invitations to the right, tradesmen below, and doubtful handwriting into a neat, uncertain stack. It is Victorian email, only with ribbons, seals, and a more flattering silence while you wait for replies. 3 deliveries come in most days. The breakfast post brings the world while you are still deciding between eggs and fish. A second reaches the house near noon. A third arrives in the late afternoon, just in time to alter somebody's expression before dinner. The family has methods for all of it. Urgent letters travel upward at once, pleasant letters rest for later, and invitations move toward the lady of the house. Bills do not sit openly on silver trays. They slip into portfolios with the tact of discreet relatives. You ask for another sheet of paper. Mr. Hobbs appears with it so quickly, you almost suspect he grows from the floorboards. He also provides a wafer box and a fresh pen without being asked. You begin to understand why guests speak of him with the low awe usually reserved for weather and bishops. He has a genius for supply. He gives you exactly what you need, one thought ahead of your own mind, then vanishes before thanks feel adequate. When you finish your note, you fold it in thirds. A maid warms the wax near the fire and passes you the seal with a cloth, because heat reaches everywhere. The pressed crest leaves a tidy impression. It makes your ordinary cousinly news look as though Parliament may need to review it. At the far end of the room, a secretary copies a rough draft into a cleaner hand. His pen moves with a whispering scratch that blends with the clock and the low fire. He sands the final line, tips the sheet gently, and taps away the extra grains. Nothing here is ever merely written. It is sorted, copied, docketed, answered, and often entered into a ledger before the day turns. Even the envelopes receive a little thought. The thickest paper goes to older relations, the briskest notes use smaller sheets, and foreign addresses demand wider margins. A box near the desk holds stamps and foreign postal marks. The labels inside are written in a hand so neat it seems morally improving. You watch the room perform its small rituals. A card is tucked into a book. A date is added to a diary, and a folded reply is slid beneath a silver letter weight. The weight is shaped like a sleeping greyhound. Its back feels cool under your thumb. Now and then someone mentions the Morning Dispatch in half words. London says this, Frankfurt advises that, and a messenger may be sent before evening if the answer cannot wait. No one explains the figures to you. You are a guest, not an accountant, which is frankly a mercy in any century. Still, you sense the scale through the furniture of the thing. The leather cases are sturdy, the ledgers thick, and the pencils sharpened at both ends for reasons of efficiency. A house like this is always writing to somewhere else. Even its quiet depends on replies arriving by train, by rider, or by a man with a locked case before sunrise. By 4 o'clock, the room shifts from letters to visits. The cards come out more openly now, and names begin to matter in a different, softer way. A tray in the hall receives callers' cards on a strip of silver mesh. Each rectangle carries a whole little weather report of standing, kinship, and intention. A morning call in the country is not quite morning. It belongs to the hours after luncheon, when roads are dry enough and hats have settled into good behavior. You may call for a quarter hour. You may stay longer only if pressed, which means actually pressed, not merely smiled at. A lady may receive in the drawing room or the morning room. She may also be conveniently not at home while sitting upstairs in excellent health. This fiction oils the social machine beautifully. It lets everyone decline everyone else without anyone having to admit a preference. In the front hall, a visiting book lies open on a side table. Its ruled pages hold names, dates, villages, and the brief notes of who called upon whom. The entries march down the paper in brown ink. They look almost military, though their campaign is against awkwardness. If you call and find nobody receiving, you leave cards. If you know the family well, you leave one card for the host and another for the hostess. If daughters are grown, extra cards may be left for them too. Paper multiplies very cheerfully in good society. Lady Ashworth explains this to you with the grave pleasure of a woman correcting civilization. She taps her card case against her wrist and says standards are the thin silver railings preventing national collapse. You suspect national collapse has sturdier causes, but you let the railings stand. Her card case snaps shut like a small verdict. The corners of some cards are turned down. That folded corner tells its own tiny story, though the code seems to vary by county and confidence. You decide not to experiment. Mr. Hobbs has enough to manage without your innovations in paper geometry. When a carriage arrives, the sequence is wonderfully exact. Wheels hush over gravel. A footman goes out. Cards come in, and a maid carries a message upstairs. Then the answer returns. Mrs. So-and-so is at home, or regrets she is not receiving, or hopes the caller will excuse her until Thursday. Nobody appears wounded. Everybody understands the dance well enough to admire the steps. As a guest, you may join an afternoon call if your hostess suggests it. You may not casually install yourself in another family's drawing room like a potted fern seeking better light. Rank, intimacy, mourning, illness, and plain fatigue all matter. The trick is to seem pleasantly available while never being burdensome, which makes the whole business rather like polite chess. You accompany Lady Ashworth for one short call in the village direction. The carriage smells faintly of wool rugs and old leather, and the windows hold the last warmth of the sun. She reviews the social map for you on the way. This widow receives, that rector's wife does not on Wednesdays, and another household may be visited only after leaving cards twice. You nod with suitable seriousness. It is a good rule of country visiting that if you do not understand something, you may still nod near a hydrangea. At the first house, you leave cards because the family is out. At the second, you are admitted and sit on the edge of a sofa that seems selected for good posture. The visit lasts exactly as long as a well-bred teacup. There are inquiries about health, roads, and the pears, then a graceful withdrawal before any conversation grows roots. Back at the estate, more cards await in the hall. The silver tray now looks like a little deck of social playing pieces. Names from neighboring houses lie in neat stacks, and next to them rests the visiting book with fresh entries drying. You read none of it directly. You glance with the humble skill of every houseguest who has ever lived. By now the light outside has turned honey-colored. The park settles into long shadows, and the men on the lawns move farther off, still raking with tender severity. They are a Victorian lawn care subscription service in human form, only with less praise and much better mustaches. Inside, the house begins its before-dinner hush. This is not silence. It is a lower register of sound, as if every carpet and curtain agrees to speak softly. You pass into the drawing room with the other guests. Gas jets glow behind glass shades, and beeswax on the parquet throws back a warm, steady shine. The piano stands open near the inner wall. Its black surface reflects candlelight and the pale line of the ceiling moldings. A young cousin plays scales for a while, then a waltz, then something earnest and German that makes even the ferns look thoughtful. You settle into a deep chair. The upholstery gives just enough under you, and the arm smells faintly of lavender from some careful long-ago brushing. On a table near the lamp rest several photograph albums. Their covers are padded leather with brass clasps and pages thick as pastry boards. You open one slowly. Inside are rows of cartes de visite tucked into slits, each person reduced to a small, solemn rectangle. The faces stare such firm patience that you feel obliged to sit straighter in return. An album is passed from hand to hand. It serves the same purpose as a modern family feed, only nothing updates itself and nobody can pretend not to pose. Lady Ashworth peers at one photograph through a lorgnette. She announces that a certain countess has never looked natural in stillness and does not improve with chemistry. Across the room, two gentlemen inspect an engraving. A lady turns pages for an older aunt whose fingers no longer trust the stiff mounts. The whole room drifts between objects. A few people read, a few play cards at a side table, and a few simply watch the fire as if it has opinions. Tea has long gone, but a discreet tray appears with sherry and thin biscuits. Mr. Hobbs seems to move without crossing space at all. You look down, then up, and a glass is waiting near your hand with impossible correctness. His eyebrow rises only when a guest sets a biscuit crumb directly upon an album page. The crumb is removed at once. Civilization continues. Then Biscuit arrives. He enters through the half-open door with the air of a retired colonel inspecting his old command. He is not allowed in principal rooms, which has never troubled him because rules written for humans strike him as literature. His golden coat has gone pale around the muzzle. His paws click gently on the polished floor before the nearest carpet saves the house from a complete announcement. 3 people greet him in whispers. 2 people pretend not to see him, which is often how aristocracy handles difficult facts. Biscuit goes first to the piano. He settles beside the pedals with an expression of moral support that no musician has requested. The young cousin tries to continue. Biscuit sighs so deeply that the phrase ends in a laugh. A footman appears, pauses, and calculates whether removing the dog will create more movement than leaving him where he is. Mr. Hobbs performs the same calculation from the doorway. For one beautiful second, Man and dog regard each other as experienced professionals. Biscuit then chooses diplomacy. He rises, ambles to the photograph table, and places his chin upon Lady Ashworth's black silk knee. She stiffens, then softens despite herself. Nobody entirely resists an elderly spaniel who behaves as though you have kept him waiting for an appointment. She strokes his head once. She says the creature sheds disgracefully and continues stroking him with increasing commitment. The room grows fuller as dinner approaches. Candles are lit where needed, a coal is settled in the grate, and low conversation braids itself around the piano. You notice how every chair faces either a fire, a lamp, or another chair. Comfort here is arranged with the same care as finance. Someone asks whether you have seen the Orchid houses by evening. You say not yet, though you have admired them from the morning room window. Mr. Perkins is mentioned, and half the room smiles in advance at the thought of being lovingly detained among damp leaves and Latin names. Even the family speaks of him with affection. A great house, you begin to see, depends as much on enthusiasts as on grandees. Then the dressing bell sounds. It is not loud, but it carries certainty through walls, carpets, and lingering paragraphs of conversation. The room breaks apart with practiced calm. Albums close, music stops mid-page, and even Biscuit lifts one ear as if counting backward from 10. As a guest, you now enter the most managed hour of the day. Dinner does not permit the charming vagueness accepted by breakfast, and your room has already been prepared for your return. When you reach the corridor, lamps burn softly in brackets. The runner muffles your steps, and somewhere a door opens to release a brief smell of starch and hot water. Your bedchamber has altered since tea. The curtains are drawn, the fire built up, and fresh candles stand ready on the dressing table. A pair of brushes lies aligned like tools in a surgeon's case, though the surgery tonight concerns only your hair. Your evening clothes wait across the chair back. Your coat has been brushed, your shirt front set smooth, and your studs rest in a little tray as if they have spent the afternoon considering duty. A jug of hot water steams beside the basin. The pitcher has a blue rim that catches the candlelight when you pour. If you have a valet, he appears almost at once. If you have a lady's maid assigned for the visit, she arrives with ribbons, pins, and the expression of someone prepared to rescue linen from human clumsiness. You submit with gratitude. This hour rewards cooperation. You wash the day from your hands and face. The water smells faintly of soap and warm china, and the towel is thick enough to make your skin feel newly important. Then comes the careful sequence of dressing. Shirt first, then collar, then studs, then waistcoat, then coat, each part requiring a different angle of patience. Your shoes have been polished into dark mirrors. They reflect the rug pattern in small curved fragments while you fasten them. A servant straightens the set of your sleeve. Another checks that the neckcloth sits evenly and does not suggest moral collapse. You discover that elegance is mostly tiny corrections performed in warm rooms by people with steadier fingers than yours. For ladies, the labor is longer and more architectural. Hooks are fastened, skirts are shaken free, and hair is coaxed upward by methods involving pins, brushes, and quiet resolve. The house hums with these private campaigns. From beyond your door comes the soft traffic of maids carrying boxes, shawls, and the occasional forgotten glove. Even here, paper still lingers. Calling cards collected in the afternoon may be placed on a tray. A late note may wait under the candlestick for you to answer after dinner, if your courage survives soup. Downstairs, Augustin supervises the final moments in his kitchen kingdom. You do not see him, but the air sends advance notice in waves of butter, stock, and wine. If any guest has requested the fish a little plainer, he is likely muttering in Lyonnais French over a copper pan. The poor man cooks for England as if it is an ongoing exam. Mr. Hobbs soon appears at your door to ask, with gentle smoothness, whether you require anything further. You nearly say no, then remember your cuff. Before the thought finishes, he produces the needed link from his palm, like a magician with standards. The eyebrow does not rise this time. He approves of a guest who learns. When you are ready, you stand for a moment in the quiet room. Below, the house gathers itself. Far off, you hear a last carriage on gravel, then the faint closing of the front door, then stillness settling again. The early dispatch from London feels very far away now, yet it has shaped the whole day without ever asking for your attention. That is the true luxury here. Not only silver and orchids and rooms large enough to lose an opinion in, but systems so smooth, you feel life simply arrives polished. You leave your room and move toward the staircase with the other guests. Silk whispers, shoe leather creaks, and candle flames bend slightly as people pass. At the landing, you glance toward the dark garden. Beyond the glass, the orchid houses glow faintly from within, warm and damp against the cool Buckinghamshire evening. Somewhere out there, Mr. Perkins is perhaps still thinking fondly about roots. Somewhere near the hall, Biscuit is likely negotiating another ban with his usual legal creativity. And somewhere downstairs, another letter may already be waiting, sealed and tidy, ready to outrun the morning. You go down to dinner feeling the house close around you like a well-made glove. It holds your day in place with paper, polish, hot water, and impeccable timing. For a week, you live inside that machinery. It is grand, of course, but its real wonder is how gently it turns. You linger on a few small pictures from the evening, because they are the sort that stay warm in the mind. You see again the pause in the drawing room when dinner is announced. Top rows thin, gloves are smoothed, a last sip is taken, fans close, chairs give a soft little sound on the beeswax-polished floor. Then the company begins that old careful puzzle of rank and timing. You offer your arm because that is what the room asks of you. Someone else offers one to you. Somehow the line arranges itself with very little speech and a great deal of practice. Lady Ashworth follows every movement with the eager strain of a woman who would cheerfully inspect a seating plan for pleasure. Mr. Hobbs waits near the door, calm as a closed drawer, and he knows before anyone else which pair must move first and which pair must never be allowed to invent their own order. You enjoy the pleasant absurdity of it. The hostess goes in first with her chosen gentleman. The master of the house comes last with his lady. He closes the procession like the lid on a well-made box. You pass from one pool of light to another. You hear the faint crunch of gravel outside the tall sash windows. Inside, the chandeliers glow on glass and silver. The dining room waits in full order. Name cards sit like little instructions from fate. Napkins rest in exact folds. The silver is so bright that even the spoons seem to have good posture. You remember, too, the steady rhythm of dinner once it begins. The table changes by removes. Each course replaces the last with a quiet little disappearance. A clear soup gives way to fish. Fish gives way to a delicate course that Augustin thinks perfectly balanced, and several English guests suspect of being suspiciously refined, which is, of course, his point. Covers lift. Footmen step in and away. Warm plates arrive just when they should. Crumbs vanish before they can feel at home. A sauce appears in the right silver boat, as if it has answered a summons. Somewhere below, the wine steward consults the leather-bound ledger with grave devotion. Bin number, year, shipper, condition, and proper partner all sit in brown ink on the page. It is a 19th century spreadsheet in very handsome binding. You can almost hear a modern sommelier weeping softly with joy. With each course, another bottle comes up from the vaults, chosen not by whim, but by system. A pale wine stands beside the fish. Something deeper follows the roast. Even the claret seems to understand its cue. Lady Ashworth offers a running account of the candle spacing, the flower height, the cut of the asparagus, and your posture during the fish course, which she appears to consider a matter of state. You survive her remarks with the bravery of a person holding the correct fork and making no scene. Then the ladies withdraw, and the room changes shape at once. Silk recedes, chairs move back, the door closes, the scent of flowers stays behind like a polite witness. Port appears in broad-bellied decanters, the walnuts arrive. The bottle begins its smooth red journey in the proper direction, with the patient certainty of a ritual older than anyone at the table. No one hurries it. No one interrupts its route. Even indulgence has rules here. You hold on as well to the best part of the night, which is the way the whole house folds itself inward before sleep. Outer doors are checked in a fixed order under Mr. Hobbs's eye. Bolts slide home one by one. The plate room is secured. The wine room is secured. Window fasteners are tried with a practiced hand. A footman lowers the gas in the passages until the corridors turn soft and amber. In the drawing room, a servant banks the fire to a deep red heart under a gray coat of ash, ready to wake again in the morning with less trouble than most people. In the bedrooms, jugs are filled, towels are aired, curtains are drawn close against the dark park. Beyond the glass, the grounds lie still under the care of men you barely see by day, who keep every edge neat as if the grass itself has agreed to behave. Farther off, the orchid houses keep their damp, warm breath under glass, expensive and glowing and faintly smug, like the estate's own private display case for admiration. Then comes that last little island of light. A bedroom candle waits in its stick, with a paper shade. It moves through the corridor in one trained hand while you follow. There is something deeply soothing in that borrowed flame. Because in a house like this, even light arrives by service. When you reach your room, it is exactly right. The fire is banked to a slow glow. The bedclothes are turned down. A nightcap waits with a neatness that suggests it has been expecting you all day. Your boots have already vanished into the care of unseen morning magic. The room is exactly as it was when you first admired it, and also softer now. The house gives one last quiet breath. You rest inside it. Now the night seems to gather around those small scenes, like warmth around a covered fire. The estate grows larger as it grows quieter, and you drift with it through dim stair carpets, cooled silver, hushed passages, and that last steady candle, making a small, safe world in the dark. Downstairs at last, Mr. Hobbs's raised eyebrow eases to its resting place, because even perfect disapproval keeps reasonable hours. May your dreams be free of Lady Ashworth's detailed assessment of your posture during the fish course. May your dreams be free of Augustine's quiet, devastating, sustained disappointment when you asked if the sauce could be served on the side. May your dreams be free of Biscuit and whatever it is he found in the cheese room that no one will speak of. Thank you for listening. May your mind stay easy, and good night.